What if I told you that your innocent little child, giggling and playing alone in their room, might not actually be alone? What if those imaginary friends they talk about, those strange nightmares that wake them up screaming, and those unexplained fears of dark corners aren't just normal childhood phases? Tonight, we are exposing the shocking Islamic truth about why Jinn, the invisible creatures of smokeless fire, are specifically drawn to small children, and the powerful protection every Muslim parent must know to shield their precious babies from supernatural harm. From which country are you watching this video? Subscribe to our channel if you love protecting your family through authentic Islamic knowledge that could save your child from unseen dangers. In the bustling city of Medina, during the blessed time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, a young mother named Fatima noticed something deeply disturbing about her 3-year-old son, Ahmad. Every night, little Ahmad would wake up crying, pointing to the empty corner of his room and saying, "Mama, the tall man with fire eyes is watching me again." At first, Fatima dismissed it as childhood imagination, but when Ahmad began speaking in strange languages he had never learned and drawing pictures of creatures with terrifying features, she knew something supernatural was happening to her beloved child. This exact scenario has been reported by Muslim families across the world for over 14 centuries, because according to authentic Islamic teachings, children are prime targets for jinn interference. But why do these supernatural beings specifically focus their attention on innocent children instead of adults? The answer lies in Islamic wisdom that every parent desperately needs to understand, because failing to protect your child spiritually could expose them to psychological, physical, and spiritual harm that could last their entire lifetime. The renowned Islamic scholar Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah explained in his masterwork, Zad al-Ma'ad, that jinn are naturally attracted to children for several specific reasons, rooted in Islamic understanding of human development and spiritual vulnerability. First, children possess what Islamic scholars call natural spiritual openness. Their souls have not yet been completely veiled by the material world, making them more susceptible to seeing, hearing, and interacting with the unseen realm that adults can no longer perceive. This is why children often talk about seeing things that aren't there, having conversations with invisible friends, or experiencing fears about specific locations that seem empty to adult eyes. But there's something even more sinister happening that most parents don't realize. According to the authentic hadith collected by Imam Ahmad, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, specifically warned that Satan and his followers among the jinn deliberately target children because they represent the future of the Muslim community. By influencing, frightening, or harming children during their formative years, these evil entities can potentially corrupt an entire generation of believers, weakening the foundation of Islamic society for decades to come. The second reason jinn target children is what Islamic scholars term developmental spiritual weakness. Unlike adults who have built up spiritual defenses through years of prayer, Quran, recitation, and Islamic practice, children haven't yet developed these protective barriers. Their natural state of innocence, while beautiful and pure, also makes them vulnerable to supernatural manipulation. The famous Islamic scholar Sheikh Ibn Baz explained that children's minds are like clean slates, making them easier for jinn to influence through dreams, thoughts, and even direct spiritual attacks that can manifest as unexplained illnesses, behavioral changes, or persistent fears. Here's where it gets absolutely terrifying for every parent watching this video. The jinn don't just observe children from a distance. According to authentic Islamic sources, including the scholarly works of Imam an-Nawawi, certain types of evil jinn actually attempt to form psychological bonds with vulnerable children, becoming what Western psychology might call imaginary friends, but which Islamic tradition recognizes as dangerous spiritual attachments. These entities feed off the child's emotional energy, gradually increasing their influence until they can affect the child's thoughts, dreams, and even physical health. But the most shocking aspect of this supernatural targeting is how it happens right under the noses of loving, protective parents who have no idea their child is being spiritually attacked. Ibn Taymiyyah documented cases where children would suddenly develop unexplained phobias, start speaking about things they couldn't possibly know, or exhibit behavioral changes that seemed to come from nowhere. These weren't mental health issues or normal developmental phases. They were the result of jinn interference that went unrecognized because the parents didn't understand the Islamic teachings about supernatural protection. The evil jinn are particularly drawn to children during specific vulnerability windows that every Muslim parent must understand. The first critical period is during sleep, especially in the hours between Maghrib and Isha prayers when the spiritual veil is thinnest. This is when children report the most frequent nightmares, night terrors, and experiences of feeling watched or threatened by unseen presences. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, specifically taught us protective practices for this dangerous time, but most modern Muslim families have forgotten these crucial traditions. The second vulnerability window occurs when children are left alone in spaces that lack proper Islamic protection. Bathrooms, basements, dark corners, and empty rooms become supernatural hunting grounds where jinn can approach children without adult spiritual supervision. This is why traditional Islamic households always ensured children were accompanied by adults in certain areas, and why specific prayers and Quranic recitations were taught as protective shields. But here's what will absolutely shock you about the true scale of this problem. According to the scholarly research of contemporary Islamic authorities like Sheikh Saleh Al-Fawzan, the targeting of children by jinn has actually increased in modern times, because many Muslim families have abandoned the protective practices that our ancestors considered essential for child safety. We've become so focused on physical protection, car seats, baby monitors, child-proof locks, that we've completely neglected the spiritual protection that Islamic tradition considers equally important for a child's well-being. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your child is being targeted by jinn? The signs are more specific than most parents realize. According to the authentic Islamic sources compiled by scholars like Sheikh Muhammad al-Albani, children experiencing jinn interference often exhibit a combination of behavioral, emotional, and physical symptoms that Western medicine cannot adequately explain. These include persistent nightmares featuring the same frightening figures, sudden development of unexplained fears about specific locations or objects, speaking in languages the child has never learned, drawing pictures of creatures or scenes they've never been exposed to, and dramatic personality changes that seem to come from nowhere. Even more alarming, children affected by jinn often demonstrate knowledge about religious concepts, death, or spiritual matters that they shouldn't possess at their developmental level. They might ask disturbing questions about Allah, death, or the afterlife, using vocabulary and concepts far beyond their age. Some children start refusing to enter certain rooms, become terrified of being alone, or claim to see people that adults cannot perceive. In severe cases, children might exhibit physical symptoms like unexplained injuries, sudden illnesses that don't respond to medical treatment, or episodes of strength and aggression that seem supernatural in nature. But the most heartbreaking aspect of jinn targeting is how it affects the parent-child relationship. Children under supernatural influence often become withdrawn from their parents, refusing comfort that used to work, or becoming clingy in ways that seem desperate rather than normal. They might start lying about their experiences because adults don't believe them, leading to a breakdown in trust and communication exactly when the child needs spiritual support the most. This brings us to the most important question every Muslim parent must ask. How do we protect our children from these unseen threats? The answer lies in the comprehensive spiritual protection system that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, established specifically for safeguarding children and families from jinn interference. The first line of defense is creating what Islamic scholars call a spiritually protected environment in your home. This begins with consistent recitation of specific Quranic verses and prophetic supplications that form protective barriers around your living space. The famous Ayat al-Kursi, Surah al-Falaq, and Surah an-Nas should be recited daily in every room where your child spends time, especially their bedroom and play areas. These verses create what the scholars describe as spiritual shields that repel evil entities and prevent them from establishing footholds in your home. The second crucial protection involves teaching your child age-appropriate Islamic supplications for different situations. Even very young children can learn simple du'as for entering and leaving rooms, going to sleep, and waking up. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, specifically taught protective prayers for children, including the famous supplication where parents seek Allah's protection for their children, using the same words that Ibrahim, peace be upon him, used to protect Ismail and Ishaq, peace be upon them, from every harmful thing in existence. But protection goes beyond just recitation. According to the scholarly works of Ibn al-Qayyim, parents must also create consistent Islamic routines that strengthen their child's natural spiritual defenses. This includes ensuring your child performs ablution before sleep, teaching them to sleep facing the Qibla when possible, and maintaining regular prayer times that anchor the household in divine protection. Children who grow up in homes where Islamic practices are consistent and joyful develop stronger spiritual immunity against supernatural interference. The third essential protection involves what Islamic scholars call environmental spiritual hygiene. This means removing from your home anything that could attract or strengthen evil jinn, including music that contradicts Islamic values, images or toys depicting supernatural creatures, and entertainment that glorifies magic, occultism, or supernatural themes. While these might seem like innocent children's entertainment, Islamic tradition warns that such materials can act as spiritual doorways for entities seeking access to vulnerable minds. Most importantly, parents must understand that protecting children from jinn requires ongoing spiritual vigilance, not just one-time precautions. The scholars emphasize that Islamic protection is like physical hygiene. It must be maintained consistently to remain effective. This means incorporating protective prayers into daily routines, maintaining high levels of Islamic knowledge in the household, and staying connected to the Muslim community where spiritual support and guidance are available. For parents whose children are already showing signs of possible jinn interference, Islamic tradition provides specific intervention protocols that combine spiritual treatment with practical support. This includes intensified Quranic recitation in the child's presence, seeking help from knowledgeable Islamic scholars who understand spiritual healing, and creating an environment where the child feels safe to discuss their experiences without judgment or disbelief. The scholars also emphasize the importance of addressing any spiritual vulnerabilities in the parents themselves, since children often inherit spiritual protection or vulnerability from their family's overall Islamic practice. Parents who are consistent in their prayers, regular in Quran recitation, and careful about maintaining Islamic guidelines in their homes create protective environments that naturally shield their children from supernatural harm. But perhaps the most powerful protection comes from understanding that Allah has given parents the spiritual authority to safeguard their children through sincere supplication and righteous living. The scholars teach that a parent's heartfelt dua for their child's protection, combined with proper Islamic knowledge and practice, creates an unbreachable shield around that child that no evil force can penetrate. Remember, protecting your child from jinn isn't about living in fear or becoming obsessed with the supernatural. It's about implementing the same comprehensive safety measures that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, established for the Muslim community, measures that address both physical and spiritual threats to ensure our children can grow up healthy, safe, and strong in their faith. The next time your child mentions seeing something you can't see, or wakes up frightened by nightmares that seem too vivid for their age, don't dismiss it as imagination. Instead, implement the Islamic protections that have safeguarded Muslim families for 14 centuries, and teach your child that Allah's protection is stronger than any force in the seen or unseen worlds. What protective Islamic practices do you use in your home to safeguard your family from spiritual harm? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more authentic Islamic knowledge that every Muslim family needs to protect themselves from the challenges of both the physical and spiritual worlds.